Welcome to Arts Express. This is Prairie Miller, and on the show, what about that Ford aircraft carrier war zone alleged laundry room fire? Pacifica host Garland Nixon uncovers, well, the whitewashing and laundering of the truth, even as Trump accuses the media of treason and threatens their licenses for reporting what really went down.
Good evening. My name is Garland Nixon. And of course, what else is there to discuss but the U.S. attack on Iran? I mean, people, you can call it whatever you want. It isn't, in fact, what is it? It is an illegal war of aggression. During the Nuremberg trials, what was determined was that a war of aggression is the greatest crime of all, that all other crimes spring from war of aggression. And that is to, we attack the country. What happened? Our government cooked up a lie. And they've been trying to do this for many, many years. In fact, in his memoirs, George W. Bush wrote that he was upset. He wasn't unhappy because the annual intelligence report said that the Iranians did not have a nuclear weapons program, and basically there's no way he could attack it without that. So here we go. After all of these years, the United States finally attacked Iran, and it is what it is, because now, where are we? Well, if you listen to me the week before the attack, what I said was this. I said, man, I don't think they're going to do it, but if they do, and I said this, the United States will lose this war. I felt that they would lose it. If you listen to my show, I felt they would lose it. And in my opinion, basically now, the only thing the United States can do is narrative control as best they can, because this war is lost. I believe the United States was really defeated in the first week. In the first week of the battle, I think the United States was defeated. And now, where are we? In a bad situation for this reason, because the U.S., as I said, appear by all metrics, in my opinion, they're losing the war, right? The best they can do now is something like this. Yes, we blew up, fill in the blank, today. We did this today. We blew up their Navy or whatever, right? And this is the way it kind of works. It's like, let's say there's a 12-round fight. And somebody tells you, yes, sir, I punched a guy in the first round. I pushed him down in the second round. I did this in the eighth round. I did that. And they tell you every round, everything they scored. And you say, what happened at the end of the fight? Oh, I got knocked out in the 12th round. I lost the fight. But if you go blow by blow, it sounds like I won. But if you look at it, I'm really losing. And the United States is losing for a number of reasons, not the least of which being this. Not the least of which being this. The United States has a, shall we say, limited, I could say finite, or I could say extremely limited amount of war material. Air defense missiles, which we're running out, which our air defense system worked like garbage in the first place. It wasn't very good, probably one of the most porous air defense systems on Earth today. I mean, as far as its ability, its consistency in stopping missiles and drones and things of that nature, which it wasn't even made to stop drones. So the bottom line, the U.S. had an air defense system for missiles and maybe extremely large drones, but most drones we didn't have any air defense system for, and we've since admitted that. And a very limited number at extremely high cost. So what you've seen is a situation wherein people fire 50,000, 10,000, $20,000 drones, and the U.S. shoots at it with a 2, 4, 8, and at times up to $18 million missiles. Well, that's a mismatch that's not going to continue. The U.S. has a limited number of offensive weapons. They have strike missiles, JASSMs, which are about a 5,000-mile range. They have various missiles that they can fire. They're standoff weapons. They claim that they're flying over Iran and they own the skies, but there's a lot of data that I've looked at recently that shows otherwise. And of course, in war, the first thing to go is the truth, right? So we can't expect to believe everything that we read, but we can certainly expect that if we do take in open source intelligence, open source data, and we have some kind of a context through which to view it, that eventually we can come up with an idea of what's happening. Now, there's one of two things you have to think. Either the United States is getting pounded pretty good and losing a lot of equipment, or the unluckiest people on earth. As an example, the Iranians recently said, I think it was the Abraham Lincoln, was it, I believe? They said, we hit them with missiles and drones. And the United States says, no, they did not. Never touched us. However, we did have a slight fire in the in the laundry room. Well, wait a minute. At the same time, the U.S. said, yes, an Iranian vessel approached us and we fired at it, and we don't know what happened to the vessel, and then it went away. And then we had a fire in the laundry room, and the Iranians are like, no, we threw some missiles and drones at them and hit them. Well, guess what? I'm thinking it's the latter. Now, the United States recently said that we had a KC-130. It's a tanker. It's it can the KC-135 or 130, whatever it is. It's a tanker. It's a refueling tanker, and it can refuel up to 5 F-35s. And there was an incident with two of them, and one of them crashed, and the crew died. Now, according to the Iraqis, they said we shot it down. According to the Americans, no, it just happened to go down. Really? Well, boy, we sure are unlucky, huh? Fires in the at the exact same time the Iranians say they fire a missile, we coincidentally have a fire in the laundry room. At the same time they say they shot down our plane, just coincidentally a plane in that area has to go down. You know what? As unlucky as we are, I mean, what next? The dead soldiers, what are you going to say? They slipped on a banana peel? What happened? Oh, that guy just slipped on a banana peel. It's absurd. This is a war, and we're losing planes. By my count, there's somewhere around 7 F-18s getting shot down. Now, F-18s. Now, by the way, according to the United States, three of them went down from friendly fire. Really? I just think that the United States has no chance of winning this war. It is absurd. And this is what happens when an empire goes around the world and tries to control everything and at some point says, oh, that's it. We're going to take Iran. And why did they take? Let me say this. I did an interview on Twitter or X or whatever it is for Mario Nawfal, the guy that's the friend of Elon Musk's friend, right? And he says, "Oh, I want to interview you." I said, "Yeah, sure, whatever. I'll interview with anybody." We certainly have our ideological differences, but okay, fair enough. He was very nice to me, so it was a good interview, And he asked me, "What do you think this is about, Garland?" And I said, "That's simple." I said, it's not as simple as we got dragged into it by Israel. I said, clearly, Israel has their view, and they're like, we want greater Israel, we want to take all of these countries over and make them Israel. I said, that's their plan. It's religious, it's half nuts, but that's their plan. I said, America looks at it like this. China is becoming very, very powerful, and America wants to rule the world. Well, whenever you start off with that, it's not good, but okay. And we know we can't fight China. I mean, we cannot go over to China with that gigantic military and fight them. Forget it. So the US says, here's what we'll do. We'll take over Iran. And when we take over Iran, we can cut off the oil to China. And of course, as you've probably heard of the Straits of Hormuz, where all of the oil comes, we can cut that off and we can choke China out by cutting off their oil. I said, so you have a confluence of interests. The Israelis want to take all the land around them and turn it into greater Israel. The Americans want to take Iran so that they can choke China off or some kind of insane world hegemonic idea. I said, and the two align. And so while Americans are just, yes, the Israelis are dragging us around, the U.S. empire wouldn't do that, just being dragged by the Israelis. This is a U.S. This is the stuff that was talked about during Biden. It was talked about, remember Obama? Pivot to China. That was it. At that point, it was, we got to go to war with China, which we all know would have turned nuclear and we'd have all died. But that's what started. Pivot to China. We're going to go to China and we're going to knock them down. Why? Because they have the unmitigated gall to grow their economy faster and more powerful than we do. We can't allow that. I mean, I don't see how anybody could argue based on anything else other than the U.S. is losing this war. The U.S. is, one, losing the war. Number two, the U.S. apparently has approached the Iranians on a number of instances and said, we'd like to get a ceasefire, and the Iranians have said, no. I don't know if you know anything about the history of war. There's some great books to read, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. But here's the bottom line. Vi victus, that's a Latin term, and it means woe to the vanquished. When you lose a war, ain't no negotiating. The winner will impose the terms of the victory upon you. The United States is losing a war. And might I add, what are we going to do? Another week or two? Have you been looking at gas? You ain't seen nothing yet. What is the U.S. going to do? Well, we won't listen to you, Iran. What are we going to do when the gas is $8, $9, $10 a gallon? When our economy implodes, collapses? Because that is what will surely happen if we keep down this road. And it may be No way to stop it now. And for those of you who have great grandparents or grandparents that lived through the Depression, I hope you listened to them while you were young, because we are rapidly moving in a direction that will unequivocally take us there. There's no way it doesn't. 25% of the gas and oil that goes to the world is now cut off. That's where we are. It's a bipartisan foreign policy thing. Yay, we got to go out here and rule the world. Nothing for the American people.
When Johnny comes rolling home again, Iran, Iran, we know he'll never roam again. Iran, Iran, his legs don't work and his shoulder droops, but that's okay, we support the troops. We will all think twice when Johnny comes rolling home. When our boy comes back broke and bent, Iran, Iran, we'll wonder why he ever went. Iran, Iran, McConnell gets all his contracts done and a coward claims he's the favorite son, but we'll all think twice when Johnny comes rolling home. The White House thinks they'll do the job. Iran, Iran, they'll never hear our Johnny sob. Iran, Iran, they have no idea who attacked our boats. It's buried in John Bolton's notes. Trump will not be there when Johnny comes rolling home. Again they tell us there's a threat. Iran, Iran, how gullible do we have to get? Iran, Iran, they tell us that we must strike back to avenge a fictitious non-attack. It will be for not when Johnny comes rolling home. We wait for Johnny to arrive. Iran, Iran, he will be more dead than alive. Iran, Iran, he joined to fight for the USA. Can't understand, he'll get tossed away. But we'll all wake up when Johnny comes rolling home.
And you've been listening to Freedom Toast. And coming up next on Arts Express.
If you want to have freedom, you got to go where the freedom is, don't you? That you're going to send American boys across that ocean? I say you tell Mr. Morgan and Mr. DuPont and Mr. Rockefeller to get over there and do some of the fighting.
Oh, what do you think I should be?
The center of attention.
Jack, you said you'd be back Tuesday.
What difference does it make? What do you think I've been doing? Running around listening to the sound of my own voice?
If you were mine, I wouldn't share you with anybody or anything. You're a lying Irish whore from Portland, and you used me to get Jack Reed to marry you.
Is the Socialist Party prepared to take a position on the draft or not? The officer, these men have the legal right to assemble.
What the hell are you doing?
Me? I write.
You right?
Huh?
You wrong.
I'd rather be with a fighter who wants to change the world than a critic who wants to mourn it.
Well, the place to be now is Russia.
You don't have to tell me what's happening in Russia. I read the papers.
Well, come with me. Support you and we'll join you in revolution.
And those were scenes from the Russian revolutionary classic Reds, directed by and starring Warren Beatty as famed writer and rebel John Reed, writer as well, lover and comrade in arms Diane Keaton as Louise Bryant, and Jack Nicholson as pessimist playwright Eugene O'Neill when it comes to revolution, and Miriam Margoyles as, well, designated woman writing in notebook Though as she protests in our upcoming conversation, she actually portrayed the secretary of the Communist Party, starring in no less than 203 films, including her Gertrude Steins and Queen Victoria's, both twice each, plus Lenin's wife Krupskaya in Stalin. Miriam also shares memories of the late Diane Keaton on Reds and her latest film, A Friend of Dorothy, nominated for an Oscar this past year about art, seagulls, and an alienated black youth. First, some scenes from A Friend of Dorothy, then Miriam Margoyles, joined by the filmmaker Lee Knight.
A month ago, your late grandmother updated her final wishes.
She was obviously losing her marbles.
I can assure you that Mrs. Woodley's marbles were very much intact.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yes?
My football went into your garden, I think. Sorry.
One should never apologize for an interest in literature.
I didn't get your name.
It's Dorothy.
Come round here often?
Every day.
Wow.
You are the first person ever, truly, to see me.
So, you're a friend of Dorothy?
Hello.
Okay, darling.
Hello, Miriam Margoyles, and welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. But you can call me Miriam.
Okay.
Say Miriam.
Yes. All right. A Friend of Dorothy is remarkable not just for a rarely seen bond between youth and elders, but one based on a mutual embrace of art and literature. What are your thoughts about that unique cultural perspective in this film?
Well, we do need cultural perspective, and we need to acknowledge our history. It's not really necessary to make it a separate history, I feel. Sometimes Lee and I disagree about that because I think that he feels very much that he's been maybe excluded from the stories that belong to us. I just want people to know the joy of literature, of theatre, because in that is the soul of a nation. And it's part of our lives as artists. So I celebrate tremendously that aspect of this script, which I loved when I read it first, and I still do.
And I don't think I can top that, so I'm not going to say anything because that was such a beautiful, eloquent answer from Miriam.
And Miriam, what about confiding regarding that late time in life quote that you have in the film? Quote, "People don't realize you still have a soul that needs to be nourished. You see me, yes, that's it."
Well, I believe it's true. I don't like growing old, but it's better than the alternative. And I think loneliness and the consciousness of those who have gone, the sense that there's a bird in Australia called a shag. It's not the same shag that we know the word for, but it's like being a shag on a rock, which means a seagull just isolated. Everybody around has died, and it doesn't have to be like that. Young people can reach out to us and we to them, and we have something to give. As long as we're alive, we have something to share.
What drew you to be part of Reds as, quote, woman writing in notebook?
What did you say? I'm afraid that...
It's I read your character is, quote, woman writing in notebook.
Is that how I'm described? Well, there's quite a bit more than that.
Oh, well, please let us know, because that's all they're saying you do in the film.
Well, you'll have to watch it.
What's the film?
Reds. It was Warren Beatty's film.
And they said, you're woman writing a novel.
I'm the secretary of the Communist Party. We filmed it in Manchester because Manchester is very like Chicago was in the 19th century, and it was an amazing experience. And of course, to work with Diane Keaton, great Diane, whom we all adored.
Yeah.
It was quite an experience. And when I met Warren not that long ago, he remembered my being in the film.
Yeah.
Because I was rather impertinent to him, and I mooned at him. I don't know if I have to describe what a moon is, but my moon was kind of bigger than most people's. Let's put it like that. And he certainly remembered me. It was a full moon.
Or a total eclipse.
And speaking of which as well, what inspired you to portray Krupskaya, the wife of Lenin, in the film Stalin?
Oh, well, that was just a wonderful story to tell. And the thing is that Krupskaya, I'm certainly no oil painting. And so I was very happy to be given the chance to show what a strong, capable, impressive woman she was. And working with Robert Duvall and Max Schell was a real treat. And we went to Russia to make the film. And of course, that's one of the joys of being an actress, is the location.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I'm more interested in the location than the script. Not, I may say, in this particular case, when I was in Lee's film, A Friend of Dorothy. Krupskaya was Lenin's wife, and she was as intellectually vigorous as he was. And I was determined that Krupskaya should have her space in that film. And I remember that Max Schell was not particularly keen on that. He's a beautiful man and a very fine actor, but he wasn't generous where Krupskaya was concerned. And I said to him, when we come back that night from the exile that both of them were sent into, I said, I will be keeping pace with you down the platform as we walk together. And he said, oh, well, I think I will be walking rather fast for you. And I said, don't worry, I'll be able to keep up with you. And I did.
And speaking of Reds, do you have any memories to share of Diane Keaton and her passing?
Well, I didn't stay knowing her after the film was over, but she was one of those people who light up a set. When she came on the set, everybody was joyous and happy, and she was generous to all of us. I remember, because we called ourselves the contract featured extras, because we weren't playing big parts, but she treated us all with that same generosity and openness that she gave to everybody. And we said, you know, I remember saying to her, the contract featured extras would like to take you out for supper. And she said, I'd be thrilled. Let's do it. And we went out. We had a very nice, I think it was an Indian meal in one of the restaurants in Manchester. She was a class act. And I think the world is poorer for her not being in it anymore.
Yeah.
But the films she made and the talent that she showed and the intellectual fire and the laughter, the humor, that will never die. That will stay with us. It's a great, great inheritance for us.
And getting back to A Friend of Dorothy, what can you say about the mystery identity of your Dorothy and why you chose to become Dorothy?
I chose to accept the part because it's a brilliant film, because the script bites you as soon as you read it. It's just brilliant. And these days, in my old age, I don't get offered such wonderful things that often. Yeah. The fact that it's a short film doesn't matter to me. I'm a short person. but I love it, and I loved it. And I believe that the phrase "a friend of Dorothy" comes from the character that Judy Garland plays in The Wizard of Oz. And lots of gay blokes adore Judy Garland. I mean, everybody adored her. I didn't know her. This happened when I was, a child. But she had that strength and sense of fun and gorgeousness that enchanted the gay world. And so it became a phrase they would call each other. Is he a friend of Dorothy? Oh, right, he's a friend of Dorothy. And so that's why that phrase became the title of the film.
And speaking of your courage to speak out about what you believe in, what are your thoughts about the Order of the British Empire and your BAFTA awards that they tried to take away from you because of your defense of Gaza?
No, I don't think so. I think that I'm very thrilled to have had that particular honour, and nobody's going to take that away from me. No.
Well, they tried.
They may have tried. I'm not aware of anybody having tried.
Oh.
Nobody's told me, and I still have it. It's a medal in my drawer. I won't say in my drawers, because in England that signifies something rather different. But it's something that I was awarded, and I am extremely proud of it.
And since this is for radio and the listeners can't see you, when Miriam looks in the mirror, what does she see?
I see a round, smiley face with white hair. Quite often I wear glasses because I can't see that well. I don't wear makeup. I've got good eyebrows, good clear eyes, quite a few lines now, and some age spots, but mainly a kind of open, laughing, generous face. The rest of my body is best left untalked about.
And are you coming out in anything else after this?
Well, I've got a film called Holy Days, which I made in New Zealand, which is about 3 nuns escaping from a greedy developer who's trying to take over their convent. And this actually happened. This actually happened in Austria.
Yeah.
So this is art, not exactly imitating life, but life goes on, and art sometimes is the spur for it. And I've also got a book coming out because I've become a writer, not as good a writer as Lee, and not in theatre. I could never write for theatre or screenplays. But I've written a book which is going to be... Actually, I'm writing it. When I say I've written it, it's still...
Well, you're supposed to be writing it.
I'm supposed to be writing it. It's in my head, and it's called Miriam's Full English. And it's about what goes to make up the United Kingdom and why we don't welcome people, new people, into our worlds, and how I think we should. So it's both political, and also there's a dollop of filth in it, because my language is appalling. I'm looking at my words as they come out of my mouth when I talk to you, and I'm keeping them as clean as possible, but because I don't want to offend people. But I'm known for being very sexually explicit, and I think people quite welcome it. And certainly, in my experience, sex sells. And I want to sell my book. So I'm putting in sex and more sex.
Yes! Give the people what they want.
But I can assure you that as I'm 84, it is from memory.
Okay, well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us on the show. And I will get the word out about A Friend of Dorothy.
Thank you. And then they're going to be streaming it through America at selected cinemas. All the nominated films, short films, will be screened in cinemas across America at a cinema near you.
Yes. It's only 21 minutes, and you'll never spend a better 21 minutes.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, both of you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
And now, global activist Greta Thunberg.
We need to talk about what's happening in Cuba right now. As the Trump administration is waging illegitimate wars across the world, killing countless of people, it is also strangling the Cuban people, deliberately, methodically, and openly. The pedophile Trump himself bragged about it, saying, "There's an embargo, there is no oil, there's no money, there's no anything." He said it like it was something to be proud of, while millions of people have been plunged into darkness by rolling blackouts, while hospitals lose power, while ambulances run out of fuel, while shelves go empty. The United Nations has warned of imminent humanitarian crisis. Intensive care units and emergency rooms are compromised. Newborns, the elderly, the sick, all paying the price. This is not an accident or an unfortunate side effect of some policy disagreement. This is the intended outcome. Since 1962, the US embargo has been designed, in the words of the US State Department itself, to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow the government. Now the Trump administration is escalating it further, plotting what they themselves have called a takeover of the island. We cannot be silent about this. Cuba did not stay silent when the world needed it. For over 60 years, Cuba sent its doctors to all corners of the earth. Cuban medical workers fought Ebola in West Africa. They responded to disasters in Haiti. They trained generations of doctors from all over the world. When liberation movements were fighting for independence from colonial rule across Africa and much of the world was looking the other way, Cuba stood in solidarity, not just in words, but in action, with real material support. Cuba stood up for the world, and now it is time for the world to stand up for Cuba. On the 21st of March, the Nuestra America convoy arrives in Havana, carrying humanitarian aid by air, land, and sea. That day has been declared the International Day of Solidarity with Cuba, and I'm asking all of you, every friend of peace, every defender of the right of peoples to determine their own futures, to join. Wherever you are in the world, go to your local US embassy and make your voice heard. Find your local Cuba Solidarity Network, organize something in your community, show up, because the right of the Cuban people to build their own society, free from siege and economic sabotage, is not a matter of partisanship, it is a matter of basic human dignity. The people in power do not act unless we compel them to. And so now we compel them. Together we say it loudly and clearly, Cuba sí, bloqueo no.
Well, now I ain't a man to point a judge, very willing to hold a grudge, but I think it's time to set me a few choice words. All about that demon automobile, the metal monster with the polyglass wheels, the end results of the dream of Henry Ford. Well, now I got a car that's mine alone, to me and the finance company owned, a ready-made pile of manufactured grief. And if I ain't out of gas in the pouring rain, I'm a fixing a flat in a hurricane. Once spent 3 days lost on a clover leaf.
Hi, this is Jack Shalom. We last had writer and filmmaker John Sayles on our show about 3 years ago, talking about his novel Jamie McGillivray. Of course, John is also known for his films. Now, in his latest book, Crucible, he furthers the story of the struggle of American labor when organized labor in Michigan took on that force of nature, or better, force of capitalism, Henry Ford. I'm happy to be talking today with John Sayles. Hi, John.
Hi, nice to be back.
John, tell us a bit about the storyline of Crucible and what the challenge was that you set for yourself with this book.
Yeah, it's set in Detroit and Brazil between 1927 and about 1943. Kind of the arc of it was the highest point of Henry Ford's success and popularity, down to the point where he had to give the company up and let his grandson run it. But really, the story is told through a lot of other people's lives who are kind of more on the front lines. Workers at the River Rouge factory and eventually the Willow Run factory where they were making B-24 bombers, newspaper reporters, a young woman who's a radical Communist Party member, basically people whose lives are affected by these sometimes whimsical ideas that Henry Ford would have. The most whimsical being that in 1927 he bought a chunk of the Amazon basin in Brazil and decided he would make his own rubber by growing rubber trees there and starting a huge plantation.
As you describe him, Ford was such a unique, larger-than-life figure. How much of that was hype?
Well, what he was, in his own words, was a tinkerer who didn't really invent anything new, but took things that had already been there and found a better way to put them together. He did some innovative things as a manufacturer that affected people in a positive way. Fairly early on in the game, he decided, I want my workers to be able to afford the thing that they're making. He doubled the pay of his workers, and basically they could buy a Model T Ford. That idea that an unskilled worker might be able to own an automobile and maybe even their own house was a new thing, but it worked. He also paid his African American workers the same as his white workers, and they weren't all janitor jobs, they were assembly jobs. But on the other hand, he had this idea that he was a vessel and that something larger than human beings had touched him. I don't just know how to make cars, I know how people should live.
How would you compare Henry Ford to a certain current Tesla CEO?
I think there is a difference in that Henry Ford actually wasn't that much into money. He didn't live an extravagant lifestyle. He had one big house. He didn't like parties. He was notoriously anti-Semitic. But there are a lot of similarities, and I think the main one is when human beings get that kind of success, it's hard for them not to think, oh, I know how to do everything. I know how everything should work.
How much did the birth of advertising have to do with Ford?
He was a gearhead. He had to be kind of cornered by his son, Edsel, among other people, to even go beyond the Model T. He thought, well, it's a good, efficient machine. Our job is to make this machine more efficient. And the whole idea that somebody might buy a car because it was a status symbol seemed like kind of a frippery to him. What he wanted people to know is this is a good machine. It comes with its own repair kit and a set of instructions. And what more do you need? So when advertising came in, he really resisted it. He did not like people who had college degrees. He didn't like experts. And he was a guy who would rather be on the shop floor. However, that eventually he had to realize my competitors are out advertising me. So I'm going to have to kind of compete with that.
You must have had a lot of fun researching the car ads, which are sprinkled throughout the book.
Yeah, in Crucible, that's how I tell time for the reader, which is not by telling you what date it is, but giving you the ad for the 1936 Ford and all of its improvements. At first, it's all about reliability, and then they start getting into more sociological things. So one of them is aimed at women. They realize women are now influential in buying a car, and some of them are actually buying cars with their own money, which was not happening in the teens.
Well, the book has such a wide scope, but for me, the heart of the book are the labor struggles to form a union at Ford Motors. You have some very detailed scenes illustrating what a typical working day might be for a worker.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, there's two things going on. I think the first generation of Ford workers, which were poor people whose farm had failed, and then immigrants who just needed any kind of job, and then because he was paying African Americans well, there were blues songs written about going up to work for Mr. Ford. So he had this, very kind of multi-ethnic, multiracial workforce And I think that first generation, they were just glad to have a job. They had some discontents, but they kept them to themselves. Hey, I got a job. And then, the depression comes along and they feel pretty damn lucky to be one of the people who wasn't laid off. I think that second generation, and one of my main characters, Kaz Pilsudski, is not only a second generation American, he's a second generation Ford worker. He's starting to feel the discontents. He's starting to feel this is hard work doing the same thing over and over and over again. Some of it's very physical. There's the pressure of the speed of the production line. And I may have another 25 years of this, and that starts to alter your consciousness about your job. And in the case of the Ford Motor Company, there was the service department run by this little guy named Harry Bennett. The bathrooms for men in the Ford plant, when you went into the stall, there was no door on the stall. And there would be a service department guy, very often an ex-con, staring at you with his arms crossed. And when you got back to the line, there was a foreman with a stopwatch who timed how long you went to the bathroom. So there was this precaution against you ever speaking to another worker while on the premises. And they went even further. So for a lot of the African-American workers, there were two churches within Detroit where there were kind of progressive preachers. And if you were going to go to one of those churches and hear a guy who didn't think unions were, the spawn of Satan, you parked, if you had a car, 3 blocks away, and you walked the rest of the way, because the Ford service department would cruise those parking lots and write down all the license numbers. You'd get fired. So there was that kind of, well, the job is starting to get to me, I think they're speeding up the line kind of thing. But there was also this, they're getting so intrusive. I feel like I have to hide when I go get a drink. Henry Ford didn't drink and didn't think his employees should. And of course, that drove people into union activity.
What were the biggest challenges for organized labor dealing with Ford?
Well, until Franklin Roosevelt got to be president and he helped get the Wagner Act, it was not legal to organize in many states. So that was one of the major things until 33. Most unions were vulnerable to state authorities who might be siding with the manufacturers. They were vulnerable to organized crime. Also, I always talk about this with when I'm working with actors. My characters, they haven't seen the movie, they haven't read the book. So if you're an African American who's working in the foundry, and all of a sudden you hear this thing that, well, the white workers are planning to have a strike and form a union. Well, the history of unions was not very inclusive at that time. Yeah, maybe they might get a union, and that may be the end of us. Because you kind of, if you were paying attention, knew, well, yes, we're getting the same as the white workers, but we may have been hired as anti-strike insurance because nobody else in this country, South or North, is paying black workers what Henry Ford is. He expects us to be loyal. And this union thing may just be a fad. They don't know. And so when they make decisions, they're making decisions without the benefit of hindsight. And this could be their family's living.
You mentioned before Harry Bennett, who was head of the service department nominally, but he was basically director of dirty work for Ford. Mm-hmm. He and his goons figure in the story quite prominently, don't they?
Yeah, he was this little guy. He always wore bow ties because he explained that if you wear a regular tie and you get into a fist fight, you may be choked by it. But he was, an absolute dictator after a while. He was head of employment. And his service department, he had 5,000 of these guys. The River Rouge plant was so huge. And they really did nothing but walk around poking their nose in everybody's business and intimidating them, making sure nobody talked on the production line or anywhere else on Ford premises, checking up on people, really just there to make sure you know who was in charge and you better watch yourself.
And certainly during the strikes, they were throwing punches and more.
Yeah, one of the things that I touch on in the book, it was known as the Battle of the Overpass. And very much like what happened in Minnesota recently, they were told, when you see anybody from one of the newspapers, get in front of them and even take the plates that they've shot away so that there's no record of us beating the hell out of the Ruther brothers and the other organizers who come legally to hand out pamphlets. There's like 5 guys beating on Walter Reuther. and it's captured on film.
Now, on the international scale, you also bring to life, as you mentioned before, one of Ford's craziest schemes, one worthy of Elon Musk perhaps, of sending men quite unprepared into the Brazilian jungle to create a rubber plantation for the Ford car tires. What was Ford thinking?
Well, this is kind of the tipping point. I've been thinking about writing something about Detroit for a long time. And then 3 or 4 years ago, some producers approached me to help them sell the idea of a TV series based on Greg Grandin's book, Fordlandia. Very good writer, and he did really good research on this very scarcely known aspect of Ford, where he spent about 15 years trying to get rubber out of the Amazon. He didn't like or trust experts. So he basically sent a bunch of people who knew how to cut trees down to Brazil, none of them speaking Portuguese, none of them having any idea how to grow a rose bush, much less grow a tree. They just knew how to cut them down. So they did a very good job of clear cutting. But when it came time to grow rubber trees, they didn't know that that shouldn't be done in Brazil. You could do that in Southeast Asia, where all the diseases and bugs that had evolved with rubber trees in Brazil had centuries to evolve as well. But when the seeds came there, they could just grow them and none of those enemies of the tree were around. Well, you couldn't do that in Brazil. So it just failed over and over and over and over again. And eventually he, in interviews, started saying, well, it's not about the rubber, it's about the model community. And he did make this strange model community. Belterra and Fordlandia were the names of them, modeled after his ideal little Midwestern town. So the structures in the summer were almost impossible to live in because they had the wrong kind of roof, to the point where if you were in Fordlandia in Brazil, you were on Detroit time. So you didn't even get to be in the proper time zone if you were a Brazilian worker there. As I read it, I said, oh, this is like an allegory for American foreign policy for the last 40 or 50 years. So I don't know what's going to happen in Venezuela, but I'm afraid it could be another Fordlandia.
I mean, everything you've talked about so far, I kept saying to myself, yeah, but that's still happening now. You have in this book at least 5 subplots intertwined, running at the same time frame. If you were filming it, you would probably film each subplot more or less continuously. I'm curious, when you write novels, do you write each plot separately or write as you move along in the chronology of the story?
With historical novels, because not all my novels are historical novels, that you have this advantage is that somebody has written the overplot for you and given you a timeline.
Yeah.
So you're kind of dropping the needle on these events that you think would be good to have in the book. And then you start thinking about which of my characters would have to be there or would want to be there. So generally, I write in sequence and the characters come and go, but I'm always thinking about this fact that they may think in their own heads, oh, those black guys who work over in the foundry have nothing to do with me. I work in B building and we're almost all white guys here and we're in assembly and they're doing a totally different job. But in fact, their lives are intertwined. And, that's something I think as human beings, we tend to ignore until it comes very, very clear, oh, we're all in this thing together.
John, as a writer, were there any particular craft problems that you had to solve in order to write this book?
There's some problems that I've dealt with in other books, and so I was able to apply my last 5 or 6 books, because they have been historical fiction. I've all written them in the present tense, which I find makes it more immediate. I try to put you right there in the moment. And that solved a lot of problems for me. In general, a nice part of the process is when I start out, I don't know everything. I'm doing research as I go. I don't do, a year of research and then a half year of writing a book. I do enough research to start and have an overview, but then I may discover, oh my God, there was a race riot, in the early 40s in Detroit, not just the one that I remember from 68. This is a major thing that's going on. I have to start preparing the reader for this, because when it breaks out, it should not be a surprise that it breaks out. Things have been building up.
Well, you're so prolific that I have a feeling if I ask you what's next or what's on the burners, you'll have a reply.
Yeah, I've already written another novel. Melville is going to put it out sometime, next year. But it's called Gods of Gotham. It's set in New York City and the Catskills between 1949 and 1951, and it's got a lot of urban corruption. Vito Marcantonio makes an appearance in it. It's got the beginnings of television, of live television, and when television started getting important to America. So it's a kind of lively thing, and one of the things in the center of it is the City College point shaving scandal. Things like that are happening today, of course. So none of it is gone, but it was kind of a heady time in New York, and a lot of fun to write.
Great, looking forward to it. Well, as we wrap up, John, what's the most important thing you know about that Ford labor struggle? What do you think it could teach us for today?
I think that it's that thing of it's not going to just happen out of the goodness of the manufacturer's hearts. That at some point, even though it's a risk, you're going to have to step up to the plate and say, okay, we're doing a walkout. The first big walkout was actually a wildcat. It was just something happened in the factory at River Rouge, and people walked out. And the UAW people who had a time frame for this thing said, "Oh God, we got to get on this, or it's going to run away without us." People themselves have got to get together, and it starts with dozens, and it grows to hundreds, and then the more you have, the more power you have. It's not written in stone. People can get together and do a major thing like that and just change the face of an industry or a country.
Well, thanks so much, John. I've been talking with John Sayles, filmmaker and author of the new novel Crucible, published by Melville House. Based on the 1930s labor battles with the Ford Motor Company, I highly recommend it. This is Jack Shalom for Arts Express with host Prairie Miller.
Well, now, how I long for the good old days without that carbon dioxide haze hanging over the roar of the interstate. Well, if the Lord that made the moon and the stars had meant for me, and you'd have cars, I'm sure we'd all be born with a parking space. Well, now, Lord, Mr. Ford, I just wish that you could see what your simple horseless carriage has become. Well, it seemed your contribution to man, to say the least, got a little out of hand. Well, Lord, Mr. Ford, what have you done?
And that's all we have time for today on Arts Express, Expression in the Arts. And if you'd like to express yourself too, you can write to us at theradiogoddess@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Prairie Miller leaving the station.